Deep within the volatile financial system lies a tectonic shift that is occurring. Sadly, this shift will find its way favoring the globalists, while simultaneously hurting us. Through the intentional process of inflation, the central bankers destroy our chances of survival. Every day we witness a decaying society right before our very eyes. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Let's look at this designed collapse of society. It is intentional. It's being done right before our very eyes. I want to begin with this. Out of Bloomberg, avian influenza drives turkey prices up 6.4%. So what I'm looking at here is just to note inflation. One of the most obvious and clear examples of inflation is through food. Where I'm living in Toronto, I'm experiencing food prices increasing every single year over year for many years that I've been paying attention to this. And I believe for the most part, everyone listening to this is experiencing the same thing. To different degrees, of course. Some people may say it's only a couple of percent, and others may say it's higher. But let's take a look at this. The average cost of a Thanksgiving dinner in the US this year will rise to a record, topping $50 for the first time, as turkey prices jump 6.4% after the worst breakout ever of avian influenza wiped out millions of birds. So I'm going to suggest to you that it's not just the avian flu which has become a problem, but it is all food in general. And they even say that in this article here. They're just trying to highlight the whole avian flu thing to instill some fear in you. A turkey weighing 16 pounds, that's 7.3 kilograms, will increase to $23 from $21. So this is a fairly significant jump because it's a short time, only 1 year. Now, most people, whether it's $21 or $23, they're still going to pay that value. However, what does it say about the value of money over time? That's right, is declining. But most people don't really pick up on that. They simply go to the store, buy what they need to, and at the end of the month, they're left with less. But they figure, well, I'll just cut back on this or cut back on that, or perhaps just get a line of credit or get some sort of home equity loan or anything. They'll figure out a way to do it. But ultimately, what I'm finding, the statistics that I've shown here, is that people have found themselves into more debt. Now, Canadians often find themselves to think that they're superior to debt. They don't really see that they're getting into debt because most of the time it's held in their mortgages. They have gigantic mortgages, in fact, and then they take equity out of their homes. They set up line of credits. They do all sorts of business like this, thinking that you'd never have to worry because the home prices will always go up. So as long as you have debt that's good debt, that's what they call it, good debt, then you're okay. Well, in fact, Canadians are currently in the most amount of debt ever in history. When we have something that's ever in history, guess what? It reverts itself back to that middle there, the median. So think about these things right now. Thanksgiving dinner inflation, you can see the average cost of 12 items typically served during your holiday meal is projected to rise to a record. Does that surprise anybody? Come on. There's inflation going on, and we are seeing this simply because of all the quantitative easing, all the stimulus, all the TARP packages. Every country is engaging in that. Look at it rise every single year. Let's look at this. Out of the New York Times, half of New York City residents say that they're struggling economically, making ends meet just barely, if at all, and most feel sharp uncertainty about the future of the city's next generation. Sounds like something the Money GPS would have on here, but of course that's not. That's the New York Times. That's a poll that they did here, and it shouldn't surprise anybody. When you look at the stats, which I'll show you in a moment, simply pretty obvious. And right here, they're saying that an atmosphere of economic anxiety pervades all areas of the city. In fact, 51% of the New Yorkers said that they were either just getting by or finding it difficult to do so. So when I talk about these type of incidents here, a lot of people say, this is just not the case. I live in New York and everything is fine. In fact, everything is awesome. But that's not the case. See, 51% of these New Yorkers who were polled, of course, is just a small amount, but they're not feeling so good. Now, studies and polls and everything, they can sway the information in one direction or another. What I've shown here is that we have seen areas in Manhattan that are booming with the extremely expensive condos that we've seen, houses being built. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases. So obviously there are some people who are doing really, really well, and there are a lot of other people just barely getting by. What do you think about this? America has a perpetual population of food stamp beneficiaries greater than the number of Canadian citizens. What we're looking at is the new data released by the Department of Agriculture in the US. October 9th shows the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, that's called SNAP, that's the food stamp program. Enrollment exceeding 45 million people for 51 straight months. That's actually exceeding by far the population of Canada, which is less than 35 million. Think about that. Think about that, Canadians. Think about that, Americans. What do you have here? You have more people in this program, the SNAP program, than all of the Canadians and other countries as well. You have a very, very serious problem. What happens if you cut back on SNAP? Think about that for a second. What would happen if you cut back on SNAP, on the food stamp program, on the Medicare, on the Medicaid? What happens if you cut back on all of the disability programs? What happens if you cut back on any of the Social Security type programs, social assistance programs? You have people rioting on the streets. You have people killing each other. That's really what it breaks down to. Sure, they can go a little while. They can start cutting back on certain things. Maybe they won't go to the movies anymore. Maybe they won't buy that new pair of shoes. But ultimately, as soon as their food becomes too expensive to afford, they start to riot. The riots break out into violence very quickly, and you have bedlam and chaos. This is going to happen if things continue the way that they are. Now, of course, the government can always find a way to print money. They can always find a way to expand their debt. Even if other countries are not buying that, well, you always have the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve will gladly buy up all the debt. And of course, it's not a problem, as many of the financial analysts say, because we owe the debt to ourselves. One of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my entire life. Now let's move on to this here out of my book, just some statistics. I wanted to compare. Now this book was basically written in about 2011, but wasn't published until January 2012. But these statistics were probably from 2011 here, as we see 50 million people on Medicaid, more than 40 million Americans on food stamps. So, I said more than 40 million Americans on food stamps at the time. And we're looking at, in a few short years, how they increased the amount of food stamp recipients such a short time because of all the unemployment that was happening. There's more stats here if you want to read them. I'm going to move on. To change gears, we all saw what happened in the Paris attacks. And again, I'm going to mention just very briefly that the Google AdSense that I had on the video I did about the Paris incident, they removed my information there, even though I didn't include any links at all. I didn't include any links, any titles that would have these type of words in them that would trigger a response, and they still took away the AdSense. I don't really care about the AdSense money. That's not what I'm talking about. If you continue to what they call breaking the rules, they'll kick you off. So this is a very serious thing, how they like to do this, the censorship thing. I don't know how they've figured it out that I was talking about that, but anyway, just wanted to let you know that. Some of the suspects in the Paris attacks took advantage of Europe's migrant crisis to, quote, slip in unnoticed, the French premier said on Thursday, warning the EU needed to take responsibility over border controls. Now, I do agree that they should have this responsibility, but they're being let in on purpose. How do you think this is happening all over the world, in fact? You know where I'm getting at. They allow them in. They allow the worst of the worst in. It's not the people who are honest, hardworking people that get in. Those people get rejected. A lot of times they allow the worst of the worst in. They want disruption. They want chaos to occur. This is the silliness. They say, if you don't want immigrants into the country, well, then you're this or that. That's not what this argument is about. Perhaps some people can argue about that. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is, look at the statistics. Look at Operation Gun Runner. Look at Fast and Furious. Look what they allowed to happen intentionally. Knowing this intentionally, CBS got the documents in those cases. So you can't use these type of arguments. They want to disrupt the peace. They want to disrupt this on purpose to cause chaos, to allow it to expand. But while all this is going on, you're being distracted. Look at this. I want to hold your hand. Trudeau whisked away from adoring Manila mob. That's right. We have these celebrity presidents and prime ministers there to be waved in front of you to distract you from reality while they rape and pillage everything you have. Don't be distracted. Look into the truth and remember that you need to find this out and figure it out for yourself. Find your own version of the truth. Look into as many different versions of that as you can. Take my information, take others' information, do your own research, figure out the truth. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. And last but not least, if you found the video informative, I know you'll find my book, The Money GPS, even more informative. You can actually flip through the pages of the book. If you go over to Amazon, they have a look inside feature for you to take a look at. Take care.